you how old his wife is, I'm not gonna tell you how old Rick is, but his son will tell you that he's five years and 11 months old.
6 and
6
11
and 11. I'll get it right
twelfths.
with him.
6 and 11 twelfths.
11 months, all right. So anyway,
He's got a mathematical brain.
there you go. And, but we're glad to have Rick with us. We're looking forward to his lesson. He told me this has been one of the most challenging lessons that he's ever written. And I called and made a request for this lesson, and he told me he really had to put some energy and effort in. So I'm looking forward to what he has to say. And I'll let him introduce this lesson.
All righty. Well, Mr. Jim's known my family for a very long time, and it's a pleasure to be able to come and be with you all and to be able to speak with you and to thank you for the support that you have given me over the past year, and you continue to support me, and I really very much appreciate it. Along the lines with what I was referring to and about, he said, you want to go ahead and do the Bible class? And I said, well, yeah, sure. What are y'all studying? And he said, oh, just go with what you want to do. Okay. But he did ask at one point that I would try to pick a lesson to put into my gospel series that would have to do with social media and its influence on young people. So I was able to kind of pivot after much panicking and direct that focus into this Bible class. So that's what we're going to be looking at this morning, and kind of just take note of the fact that we live in a time that is unlike any other time before us. You know, the information travels instantly to any and everybody at the click of a button. And with that, influence spreads rapidly. And it's something that we need to be aware of, and I know everybody is. But some of the stuff, looking at kind of the information, some of the studies that have been done is shocking how much the internet shapes us and really turns us into who we are. And that can be for good or it can be for bad. And it really boils down to how we use it. And it's not just that we use, the internet, it makes it something negative, but it's really how we use it and what we use it for. And understanding that through the use of it, that it is shaping us, I think is the first spot to be able to recognize the influence it may have on us. Young people are connected to the internet more than I am, and those who are older than me, they're not as connected as much, but we all are influenced by it from one way or another. It affects how we think, it affects how we speak. I don't know but if you're aware of this or not, but there is a translation of the Bible that is in the new way of speaking that is almost incomprehensible to someone like me. But the young kids understand it, and I would never recommend it, but that language has spread to the point where they made a translation of the Bible like it. And so it's something we need to be aware of, the influence that it has. So if we can just start off recognizing it's not a matter of if social media will have an influence on us, but more what will that influence be and how do we guard ourselves against it. So I would like to start in the Bible. If you would turn to 1 Corinthians 15 in verse 33, it's a very, very common verse that we all understand and know, but I believe this is really where it can point us in a good direction while we're studying this idea of the influence of social media. Paul says to the brethren there in Corinth, do not be deceived, evil company corrupts good habits. And I think the idea there is the fact that you can be walking a straight line, but who you associate with can pull you to one side or the other. And that is exactly what we deal with social media. You can have every good intention to use it for positive gain and for outreach, but if you're not on guard, it will very easily corrupt you. And that is built on the algorithm, and we'll get into some of that as we move forward. I also think about Proverbs 13:20, where it says, he who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. So we have, studying the book of Proverbs, you run into this admonition over and over again, the idea of who you associate with and how it will influence you. So social media has truly amplified the volume of company that we keep around us. We have the entire world on our cell phones. where it used to be that you were influenced by the small group of people that grew up around your house. Now it is any and everybody in the world can tell you something, whether true or not, and have some sway in how you live your life. So the fact that we now walk with thousands of voices connected to us every single day, you know, we need to recognize those voices. They come in the form of influencers. They come from commentators, short form videos like your TikToks or your YouTube shorts, your Facebook shorts, all those type of things. And really what that boils down to is endless opinion that we run into on a daily basis. And often those voices are not godly voices. And recognizing that, I think, is really one of the first steps to just because someone holds the Bible doesn't mean that they're godly voices. And they speak the truth of the word. Oftentimes, as we fully recognize, looking at the religious world around us, they speak what they feel and not what the text says. So this has gotten to a point where our government has taken a special interest in the influence that social media has on young people and old alike, but specifically young people. There's been lots of studies done, and in 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General put out a study that was done on young people and the influence of social media. And if you go to if you search the Surgeon General warning for the influence of social media on young people, you'll be able to see this long report where they go through and detail all the findings they have. But I pulled some things out of this that I found to be kind of, I guess it's not shocking, but it is at the same time. The fact that 95% of the youth from 13 to 17 has some form of social media account. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but Facebook came alive in my day. So for me, it was a long time before Facebook was even really adopted. But at this point, it is just part of their everyday life. And a third of that 95% say they use it almost constantly. And that, again, something I have a hard time even understanding, but that is the world in which we live in. They are constantly connected, whether it is to associate and talk with friends, or if it is something where they're just seeking entertainment, they're constantly connected to it. And even though the common age is 13 that is required to have a social media account, nearly 40% of children 8 to 12 have social media. So in the young kids who are still developing, and I fully recognize that men, we continue to develop until they say 25, but I think it's well into our 30s, where we finally mature. But these kids who are so susceptible to anything that is said to them, they found workarounds where now they have social media, even though they're supposed to wait until they're 13. And a lot of that comes from the parents being okay with it and them having that influence. And I guess what it really boils down to is entertainment, and the kids are able to be busy and they don't scream a lot and when they're entertained. And that's because a lot of this is built and designed to almost put them in a trance-like state so that they're constantly sucked into whatever's in front of them. And that is what's molding them, if we allow that to be the case. And that's where we have to really think about and look at the safeguards that we can put. But even though with this widespread use among the children and the adolescents, robust independent safety analysis on the impact of the social media have not been thoroughly conducted. So they recognize there's a problem, but they haven't done true analysis to see what impact is happening from a safety standpoint for children that are younger, because if you acknowledge that, then you acknowledge that your 13-year-old bar is not being observed. So that goes widely unstudied. But there are increasing concerns among researchers, parents, young people as a whole, healthcare experts, on the impact that social media is going to have to their long-term mental health. You could look at that from a lot of different ways, and one of the things that I notice is that instant gratification that you get. When you press a button, you get something out of it, and then if you don't get something out of what you're doing right away, you then get bored and you move on to something else. And we noticed this with Tristan. Tristan's not allowed to play on his tablet except for when we travel. But after we've traveled, we'll let him log on and watch this Minnow app, which has got, very beneficial entertainment on it. It's teaching him things. And when we get to our destination, he's now had 6 hours of being able to click and get what he wants. We then see that there is a time of regression right afterwards. And think about this. This is only like a 6-hour trip. And we can see the impact on him immediately when we get there and it's time to turn the tablet off. So it's something that you can see very quickly in how it affects the young people. But this really boils down to mean that it's no longer just entertainment. It has become one of the primary environments for engagement that young people have. This is, I guess, for my day, it was, the Walmart parking lot where you would go and meet up with people and talk. Well, this is just now done at their house, on their phone. That's. I come from the country, so that we met at the Walmart parking lot. But that's what we did. So you can judge it if you want. I don't blame you. But these young people are spending more time online than they are with people in their normal life. Their communication skills are not as sharp as 15, 20 years before at the same age because they're just not having to communicate. They don't read body language the way those who grew up without it did. So it truly has a massive impact on their development and their people skills. But one of the more dangerous things is what it does on their self-esteem. And this was one of the main focuses of the study that they did on it. And that, the idea that spending more than 3 hours per day on a social media platform doubles the risk of mental health issues. Now, if you noted a few minutes ago, I mentioned that they're constantly on it. So 3 hours a day is probably not out of the norm for most young people who are on social media. But one of the most quoted findings in the Surgeon General's report states the types of use and content children and adolescents are exposed to pose mental health concerns. Children and adolescents who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media face double the risk of mental health problems, including experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. And this is concerning. A recent survey showed that teenagers spend an average of 3.5 hours a day on social media, and when asked about the impact of social media on their body image, 46% of adolescents aged 13 to 17 said that social media makes them feel worse. That's a big number. That's a big number. And it doesn't mean that social media automatically causes depression in children. That's not what it is. But what it is that it demonstrates the strong association and that it has with mental illness. But also the researchers continue to study. They're trying to figure out what is the exact mechanism. Is it just because Sally said that I wasn't pretty, or is there something that is actually in the algorithm that they are spending more time on this video, so then the algorithm feeds them more? But what was the reason they were on that video longer? So what they're looking to try to figure out is the algorithm actually feeding into this negative body image or this negative mental health because of the reaction they get on the video. You don't have to just like it or give it a thumbs up or give it a thumbs down for them to be able to understand that you spent more time on this video than you did this one. And then they'll feed you more. So when you're scrolling as a young person and you see something and it makes you angry, but you don't react to it, but you watch it again, now they recognize this is content they watch longer, so then it feeds them more of that content. So it's not necessarily from a malicious standpoint that the social media companies are trying to bring young people down, but what it is you stayed on that video longer. Here's another one. But they don't evaluate what it would be, and it'd be very difficult for them to be able to evaluate why they actually stayed on that video longer. But the longer they're on that video, that gives it an upward trend in the algorithm, so then it's pushed to more children, more young people, so then more come in contact with it, And this cycle just continues. So kind of leading into the next point of this is with that, the idea of seeing that they're on it longer, so then they send them more like it. This feeds into what is called the algorithm, or the data that is obtained from how the young people observe different content, and it is designed to maintain their attention. So the longer they're using this platform, the more ad clicks they get, the more money, more revenue that they then make, being the companies. And that's why it is pushed in front of them. So you have a lot of kids, they call this doom scrolling, where kids will be bored, they'll open up the Facebook and it's constant dopamine hits in their brain. They're just looking for the next thing that excites them. And doing this, what they found is if they engineer the algorithm so that it puts more of those videos in front of kids who stay longer on them, the more likely they are to keep that phone in their hand versus put it down and go do something else. And the longer they're on it, the more advertising they get. But for me, this raises a spiritual question. Who's your master at that point? If the social media is the one that is driving all of your attention, right? Who are you serving? And I think a lot of times it's just SELF. I think it's yourself. You're serving your own, fleshly entertainment. And I don't mean necessarily that's outright sinful entertainment. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is the fact that it's the dopamine hits you get when you see something you enjoyed. For Tristan, he loves this group that is called, what is it? What's the one where the kids do the crazy things with the balls? How Ridiculous. Now, the title alone should tell you that it's ridiculous, and it is. But they'll set up these wild contraptions, and they'll do something, and there's nothing negative about it. It's just fun entertainment. But he loves it, and we have to guard him for not watching it. And I think that, there's nothing sinful about it. There's nothing that could be even portrayed as sinful. But it is holding his attention, and he wants to go back for it because he gets joy out of watching it. And so with all of that, as we come of age and we start learning right and wrong, yet we are able to just miss the fact that social media has become my master because I'm always looking to serve it. I'm always looking to open it up, click, and scroll. And I think about what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6:12, says, all things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Right? So if you allow this to just control your life, and parents, if we allow it to control our children's lives, we have now given them over to the power of really the desires of the flesh, just the entertainment value, the dopamine hits that you get off of it, the enjoyment, and they get to where they can't think without playing on their phone. They don't want to do anything else but have the phone in front of them. So it's one of those things. If we cannot set the phone down, then the phone has become our master, and that's something we just cannot let happen. In 2025, the Pew Research Center found that about 1 in 5 teenagers say social media hurts their own mental health. If I was a young person and I was polled, there's no way I would answer this question. First, that's just me. I never would have. I'm skeptical of those kind of places anyways. But I think about, you have 1 in 5 who openly admit it to the Pew Research Center. How many of them are actually having the problem? Who wouldn't actually click yes, that it's actually a problem? So at a minimum, we're looking at 20%. And many more believe that the negative effects will have long-lasting effects, not only within their small group of friends, but also with their age group as a whole. So they recognize that it's a problem. They recognize that the influence that it has on them and how it can take up their time and pull them away from things that would be beneficial, but yet they keep going back to it. This is that influence that I'm talking about, that we really need to make sure that we are drilling into our children really what Paul says. I will not be brought under the power of any. It's not necessarily sinful, but if we let it overtake our lives, it then gets into, are we taking advantage of the time that we've been given to spread the gospel, do the things that God would have us to do, or are we just serving our own belly? Any questions or anything as we move through this? This was not meant to be like a sermon style. I mean, any engagement is welcomed and encouraged.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
In the study you did, in the research you did, and you talked about the, how it affects one's mental health and so forth and so on, taking away from their time and doing things that are more productive. But what about the bottom line as far as the spirituality? What effect is it having per se on the life of this young child or young adolescent that is spending this time on there? Anything specific on that?
So no specific study that I found that was related to that, but I think about just from a broad perspective of the religious world. Most of the religious world teaches error, and there is most of the religious world, right? So then that means that most of the influencers are going to be on there teaching error. And if our kids aren't grounded in truth, then they don't have the understanding to recognize it when it's in front of them. So it's very easy for them to be influenced by something that is, parallel to the truth up to a point, and then it veers. Right? And if they start to accept what this person says and they believe it to be truth, but they never go back and check it for themselves, and it gets to a point to where now that person has totally veered off, I believe it has extreme impacts on them spiritually. Yeah.
I think along with that, when you're talking about
Louder.
spiritual influence on social media,
Louder.
is it almost gives you a false sense of security. You think that you're safeguarding yourself by tailoring your algorithm towards spiritual things, and so that's all that's being shown to you. But you may not necessarily understand, if you're not fully grounded in your Bible or the truth, that what's being shown to you is error.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if you could hear her in the back, but she's saying that if you believe that you're using your social media for a positive way and what you're consuming, you're not, watching just debauchery, but what you're watching spiritual things, unless you're rooted in truth, you would struggle to recognize that you are still being led away. It's essentially what she's saying, and I think that is absolutely correct. We've talked a lot about young people, but even the studies they've done on adults have found that there's increased anger, division, impulsive speech that comes from it. I mean, a lot of us have heard the term. Oh, you had a question?
I was just going to say, one thing that I've always read over and over again about and it may not be specific to social media, but in the wave, and I think that social media adds to it, is the epidemic of loneliness that we're seeing overall, and I think that's one of the things that social media does is isolate people into that echo chamber where what you're saying, you think that you're really getting grounded in something, but what you're hearing is some of the same voices over and over again, and I think that that's one of the ways that Satan